Hi everyone, I'm Nikki. I'm a self-published author, and when I'm not writing, I'm devouring books like crazy. So if there's a book that has been made into a movie, chances are I've read the book before I've seen the movie, and whenever the people I go with have any questions, I'm usually the first one they turn to. So I decided I'm going to make these videos comparing the books and their movie adaptations to see where the movies went right and where they went wrong, that they could have stuck more closely to the books. Today I'm going to start with my favorite book, probably one of the best movie adaptations that I've seen, the Harry Potter series. And because there's 7 books and I don't want to take up too much time, I am going to divide this one into 2 parts. So now we're going to start part 1. In the first 2 movies, they stuck to the books pretty well. There's just some little things, mostly characters that didn't make it into the movie that were in the books, and they weren't prominent to the storyline at the time. But a few of them did come in later, and when they do come into the movies, you don't have that background of who they are, so they kind of just randomly appear. So the first person I'm going to talk about is in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Mrs. Fig. Now, Mrs. Fig is a neighbor that lives on Privet Drive by the Dursleys. In the first book, she's just mentioned as the lady that watches Harry when the Dursleys don't want to take him fun places like the zoo. The reason that he was able to go to the zoo that day was because in the book she was hurt, so she couldn't take care of him, and they had no other choice. In the book, shows a little more of the animosity that the Dursleys have towards Harry because they tried everything to just not take him. In the movie, they're a little reluctant, but there's really no big deal about why he gets to go to the zoo. And Mrs. Fig is an important character later on in the 5th one. She's mentioned in the movies, but again, at that point, she kind of just appears, and you have no idea who she really is other than just this random lady that runs into them after the Dementor attack. Another character that never made it into any of the movies is Peeves the Poltergeist. A poltergeist in the Harry Potter series is sort of a ghost, but he's more of a trickster spirit. He actually plays pranks on everybody, and he likes to mess with the first years especially. Again, he's not too prominent in any of the movies because later on the movies do deviate from the books more than they did in the first 2. The third thing that I had from the first movie is the invisibility cloak. In the movie, Harry gets the cloak at Christmas time, which again, it happens in the book. But in the movie, it never says who it's from, who sent it to him. There's just a letter saying, "Your father left this to me, use it well." In the book, that note is there. However, at the end of the movie, we find out who actually wrote it and sent Harry the cloak for Christmas. And ends up being Dumbledore. In the book, when Harry keeps going to the Mirror of Erised to see his parents in the reflection, Dumbledore comes and says, "I've been watching you do this. I don't need a cloak to be invisible." So why did he have the cloak to begin with is kind of one of the questions that gets answered later in the series. But overall, the first movie was very good and I loved it. They obviously couldn't keep everything from the book in the movie, but they kept all the important things. So I really have no complaints, and people that haven't read the book that see the movie, they can figure out who everybody is, what's going on. It's a very nice way to set up the rest of the series, and I think they did very well on that one. Number 2, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Again, mostly just some minor things, a character that never made it in. Penelope Clearwater. In the book, number 2, she is dating Percy Weasley. When Percy catches Harry and Ron as Crabbe and Goyle going towards Slytherin Common Room, he was hiding out with his girlfriend, and that's sort of how they run into each other. And Penelope Clearwater ends up getting petrified with Hermione. And this doesn't really have too much impact, but in number 7, when the Snatchers catch them, she says her name's Penelope Clearwater, Half-Blood, but you have no idea who that is, where that name came from, or any of that. She's just kind of a name that Hermione threw out. Whereas the book readers of the series actually know she is a real person who they have met at Hogwarts. Another issue that I have with the second movie was at the end when Dobby gets free. Harry gives Mr. Malfoy the diary, and his sock is inside, and Malfoy just not caring, gives the diary to Dobby, not knowing that there's a sock and that he's just made a big mistake. The book, however, I think shows a little more of his arrogance because the book is inside of the sock, and not caring, thinking there's no consequences for him, he just tosses the sock away and Dobby ends up getting it, and that's how he gets his freedom. I think this is a pretty big distinction just because in the book, he knows there's a sock. He knows that this is a piece of clothing that falling into Dobby's hands sets Dobby free, and he doesn't care. He just throws it away anyway, thinking he's better than everybody else. And I think that's important just because that's where Draco Malfoy gets his I'm better than you attitude, is from his parents. And you kind of see that in number 2 when you finally meet his dad. And another scene that actually never made it into the final cut, but if you watch the deleted scenes of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, you find out that Mr. Filch, the caretaker, is what's called a squib. And this is a person that has magical parents but has no magic himself, so it's the opposite of a Muggleborn. And so he has no magic. That's why Mrs. Norris is the first petrified, is because Slytherin and the heir of Slytherin just nothing to do with any Muggle anything. So we find out a squib is a very important concept now because later it does come back, and it's real important to know what a squib is. Other than that, again, the movie followed along very well, and I don't have too many problems with that one. Okay, so now we come to number 3, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This one, they still stick along with the storyline of the books pretty well, but there are a little more important things that never get mentioned. And they kind of gloss over it through the entire series, but there's still some stuff that I think that viewers, readers, whoever needs to know. So, to start with, I'm going to talk about the Marauders. Now, in the movie, it kind of glazes over who these people are. Marauders are the ones who created the Marauders map, which is the one that lets you see where everybody is in Hogwarts. And this was given to Harry by Fred and George Weasley. When Professor Snape comes along and he's asking Harry to show him everything in his pocket, and he gets the map and just does that little spell, says reveal your secrets, the map says Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs will ask that Professor Snape keep his big nose out of things. And that's kind of until later when you actually hear these names applied to people. You don't know who they are still. And in the end of the book, when they have the big reveal that Peter Pettigrew is still alive and Sirius Black didn't get Harry's parents killed, you find out, you hear Wormtail is Pettigrew, and in number 5, I believe, they finally say Padfoot is Sirius Black. And these names just correspond with the animal forms. So Padfoot the dog, Wormtail the rat, Prongs is James Potter, which it never says, and that's the stag, and Moony is Lupin is the werewolf. And they're the ones that actually created the map. And I think it's kind of poetic almost that Harry's the one that ends up with it when his dad is one of the 4 people that actually made it. Again, it never really shows who they are. Another concept that they didn't really say is the idea of a secret keeper. It kind of comes into play, they sort of reveal it, but they never actually give a name to a secret keeper, who is the person that knows the location of some hideout. In number 5, it was Dumbledore who knew where Grimmauld Place was, the headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix. Unless the secret keeper explicitly tells you where it is, you're never going to find it. Now in number 3, this is kind of the issue with who actually got Harry's parents killed, who betrayed them. Everyone thinks it's Sirius Black because he's the best friend, he's the strong one. Everyone suspects that he's going to be the person that knows the location of their hideout, when in reality it was Wormtail, Peter Pettigrew. And he's the one that actually told Voldemort where to find the Potters, and that's how they got killed. He went and told them because he's afraid that Voldemort and the Death Eaters are going to torture him to death, and he's just a coward. So he preemptively betrays his friends to save his own life. And that's sort of the argument in the end of the 3rd movie when they have this big reveal that he's alive, that Peter Pettigrew was the one that betrayed them by telling Voldemort where they were, because he's the only person that can actually give him the information. So I think they kind of should have added that, because in the movie you know that he's a backstabber, but you don't know what he did exactly, other than the fact that he's the reason they're dead. Another couple little things that sort of come into play again later in the series is in the third one, we kind of get a little more on why Snape hates Harry, because he hates his dad. Is one of the many reasons is because James Potter saved Severus Snape's life when they were all in school together. Sirius Black kind of goaded him into going to the Shrieking Shack on one of the nights when Lupin was in his werewolf form. And as we see in the movie, he has absolutely no control when he's in that. James Potter is the one that stops Snape and ends up saving his life, because he would have died that night. Later in the series, when we actually see more of Snape's background, we're going to get where the animosity stems from. But the fact that he owes James Potter his life does not sit well with him, and he takes it out on Harry. And it kind of comes more into play later when you actually see this character's background more fully. Now we're going to talk about the fourth book, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Not too many big giant holes, but there are a few things that kind of, I think, should be addressed. First of all, we're going to start with the scene that was cut out of the movie, but was in the book, and kind of, again, comes back later and has an impact later in the series. This scene is the Weighing of the Wands, where the 4 champions for the Triwizard Tournament have Ollivander sort of inspect their wands, see what everything's made of, and it talks about Victor Crumb's wand was made by the wand maker Grigorovich. Fleur Delacour's wand has a piece of Vila, which is basically a siren. It's a girl who's very attractive to men and just gets them to do whatever the heck they want just by the sound of their voice. And this Vila concept, it's never really addressed, but it's a little bit of a plot hole in the movie, because in the movie, when they're all trying to ask someone out to the Yule Ball, Ron screams at Fleur trying to invite her, which is kind of out of character for him, because he's not the one that's going to go up and ask a girl out. So I think it was important to have that she's a Vila and she kind of exudes this sort of bait to men, and that's what made him lose his mind for a second. Also, from the fourth one, I think the whole storyline with Barty Crouch Jr., who is impersonating Mad-Eye Moody, needs to be addressed. In the memory, the trial of Igor Karkaroff, the headmaster for Durmstrang, it says that he's naming all these Death Eaters, including Barty Crouch Jr. In the book, Barty Crouch Jr. and Bellatrix Lestrange, who comes into the fifth movie, are on trial for the torture of Neville's parents. In the movie, we see that he's a Death Eater because Igor Karkaroff says that he was involved in torturing the Longbottoms, but in the book, it's him and Bellatrix Lestrange. So in the movies, that Neville hates Bellatrix Lestrange, and we see this in number 5, and he says why. And it kind of glosses over the fact that Barty Crouch Jr. was there to help, but that's kind of the end of that. In the memory, he was arrested, and then all of a sudden he's free again, which would raise up a few red flags unless his father actually had something to do with it and knew that this happened. So yeah, I think that sort of should have been addressed a little bit, that Barty Crouch Sr. isn't completely clueless that his son is somewhere in the world. So in the movie, he's kind of just there, and even his dad sort of sees that, oh crap, this guy can actually be my son by some of his little nuances. In the book, Barty Crouch Sr. knows that he's not in Azkaban anymore. He helped him get free as his wife's dying wish. In the movie, he's, again, just sort of there. Like, no one other than Sirius Black has ever escaped from Azkaban. In the book, it kind of just explains it a little more. And this is where Harry first finds out that Neville's parents are alive, but he's never with them because they've been tortured to the point of insanity with the Cruciatus Curse. So Harry finds out the secret that Neville's been keeping for 4 years, and he doesn't tell him that he knows, and because it's sort of Neville's secret to tell. Thanks for watching part 1. Part 2 is going to be coming out pretty soon. If you have any ideas on book movie adaptations you think I should do, go ahead and leave a comment, or you can tweet me at Niki Sees Books. Thanks, bye.